T-bevels are great if you just want to match up an angle and then transfer that somewhere else. And I got this one which works well, but it got me thinking, it's so simple, why don't I just make one out of wood? So to make mine, I'm using walnut and cherry because that's the scraps I had on hand. I'm first starting off by planing these down to a 1/2 inch. Now this is where plywood would be a great option if you just use 1/2 inch or even 1/4 inch plywood. Next I'm ripping both out in 2.5 inch strips. So I know I'm going overboard with hardwood, but I thought it would be fun to make it look really nice and use contrasting colors. So I'm using walnut just for the body of this. For the body, I'm cutting 2 pieces at 12 inches. These are going to be for the main parts of the body on the outside. I also need a 5-inch piece with a 45-degree angle, and this is going to be where the blade sits against on the inside. Next, I'm rounding off the ends of each one of these walnut pieces. Only one end needs to be rounded off because that's actually got a functional point. That's where the blade is going to rotate. So if you're shoving this in the corner of something, you don't want the corners of these pieces or the blade getting in the way while you're matching up the bevel. Now on the blade side, this is where a pivot point will be, so I need a 1/4 inch hole. This is where the pieces will connect together using a 1/4-20 bolt. Moving on to the blade, I'm making this out of cherry. I'm cutting a 20-inch blade with a 45-degree angle. This is going to pair with that walnut piece I cut earlier. I also need to round off the end on this with the pivot point. In order to make this adjustable, I have to turn that hole into a slot. Now, normally it flips like this around, so I'm going to piece it together like this just to figure out where I have to route the slot to, and I'm just using that pivot hole to mark off the end point. So I'm using my router table just to route out the slot. I start with the hole on this because it makes it easier to line up the router table fence where I need to start. Here's an overview on how all the pieces fit together, so I'm just putting a bolt in place to line this up, but basically everything sandwiches together like this, and then the blade here, see, it can adjust around. Moving on to actually assemble this, I'm gluing all the pieces together for the body, because the blade is merely held in by a bolt. Now something I'm doing here is using the blade to help align that lower piece. Notice how I don't care about lining up the end. I'm going to trim that off later. What's more important is that the blade and the matching walnut piece fit tightly. Now that the glue is dry, I'm going to take the pieces apart, and now I just got to clean up everything. So I'm starting off by just shaving off the ends so the body is all nice and cleaned up, and then I'm going to take it over and trim off that end piece that I mentioned earlier. And with everything shaped right, I can knock down the corners and then apply some finish.